Oh, let me tell you something. Busting makes me feel good.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate the movies. I'm your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, my friend, great writer, and Letterboxd aficionado. There's so many more people on Letterboxd now. Thank God. Chase Mitchell.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, Letterboxd is this was quite a find during the COVID times. I was getting pretty burned out on Twitter, and it's just another place to put opinions that you have. So
yes, but it's I feel like there's been such a jump in people having Letterboxd accounts now. But now's the perfect time to start one if you didn't have one already, because all we're doing is watching stuff these days.
Yeah.
So why not be able to spout your opinions on it in a place where everyone is on the same page?
Yeah, I think I started mine maybe like 3 weeks ago, and I have like 89 movies that I've watched this year so far logged on there. So doing really well. Not going outside a lot.
I mean, why would you? They don't have good movies outside unless you're going to a drive-in every once in a while.
I have been to a couple of those. They've actually been pretty nice.
What's your favorite of the ones you've gone to?
Well, there's one group that, I don't have the name on the tip of my tongue, but they run one that's usually in Glendale. But then the most recent one that I went to of theirs, which is the same group, was downtown.
Secret Movie Club.
Yes.
Yes.
Both parking lots were nice. Good screens. It's really like, it reminds me of, there was a pretty famous drive-in called Starlight Drive-In in Atlanta, where I'm originally from, that I used to go to a pretty good bit, about like 10, 15 years ago. I think it might be shut down now because I think someone got shot there. But but it was a pretty great drive-in, and it's been nice to kind of recreate that experience a little bit.
Yeah, I like Secret Movie Club a lot, and we've had Craig, who's one of the head guy behind Secret Movie Club, on the show. So shout out Craig, and he knows really how to program a double feature really well. I also really like Mission Tiki, just for the space.
Yeah, but
they have some weird double feature picks.
I haven't done Mission Tiki yet, mostly because of the distance. It's a little bit of a drive, but I want to. I just, every time it gets down to it, it's like, oh, but I could just stay here.
Yeah,
and that's been winning so far. But it has been really nice to see some drive-in movies.
Honestly, the best part about Mission Tiki, for my money, is that they have movie theater hot dogs.
Yeah. And
they also have like I think they just call it the tiki dog, but it's like bacon wrap. It's got jalapenos. It's got onion rings. And I mean, I can't recreate the kind of hot dog tomfoolery at my place.
I think you just won me over. I think I'm going to Mission Tiki.
It's worth checking out.
Yeah.
Well, enough with things that we like. Let's talk about things that we don't like. The movie you've come to me with today is a movie I've been wanting to watch for a while. I watched it first thing this morning. It is not a good movie to wake up to, and that movie is The Neon Demon.
Yeah, I rewatched it this morning as well. I was wondering if I would change my mind about it upon a second viewing, but I didn't. It's not good. It starts off kind of promisingly. I mean, it's well, here's the thing. Like I was, like every 30-something-year-old man, I was a fan of the movie Drive.
Of course.
We all were. Ryan Gosling, looking very handsome and wearing a cool jacket that we all kind of wanted to have, and wear ironically, but not actually ironically.
Yep.
And, when I saw that movie, I thought, oh, man. Also, I've never said his name out loud. Nicolas Winding Refn?
I think it's Winding. I don't know.
Winding?
Winding.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna try to not say it out loud too much. But yeah, I mean, when I first saw that, I was like, oh man, he can write, like a stoic character who doesn't say a lot and just kind of, his emotions are kind of all on his face. And then I saw, a couple more of his movies, and I saw this one, and I'm like, oh, that's just how he writes every human being.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows how to talk. That's sort of how Elle Fanning is in this movie as well. She just doesn't really have the gift of the gab. It's I think the movie starts off really promisingly. There's some scenes in the beginning that are like, oh, this is kind of an interesting psychological thriller horror movie. And then there are some things that start ticking me off kind of right away. First of all, they cast Keanu Reeves as like a sleazy landlord, which I think is not only, I think casting something against type, it can be very interesting, but like, let's be honest, like Keanu Reeves is like the sweetest man alive. Like you cannot make me believe that he's a pervy, mean, angry landlord. I just don't believe it.
Even when Keanu Reeves is being a badass, like in John Wick, he's still likable.
Yeah.
This is Keanu Reeves. I don't want to say at his worst, but it's,
it's not his fault. I mean, it's honestly just a miscast. And yeah, it's also like he also still looks like Keanu Reeves. So it's like, what, you're staying at a motel in Pasadena and you just happen to have like the hottest landlord who ever lived. Like, right. It doesn't make any sense. So that was something that kind of jumped out at me right away. Like I said, I think the dialogue all feels really stilted. Going back and rewatching it this morning, there was a lot of casting stuff that I did not remember. There's a woman, an Australian actress / model who's actually on Lovecraft Country right now, who plays kind of the second lead model in this. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting to see her in something else. I think she actually did a decent job with with the material that she had, but I just don't think it's very good material.
That's, I've watched a handful of Nicolas Winding Refn movies. Of course, I've seen Drive. Who hasn't seen Drive?
Yeah.
I'm wearing the closest thing I'm ever going to get to a Drive jacket right now.
Yeah.
And then I did, during all this, I watched Only God Forgives, which I know is pretty... It's taken pretty roughly, but I actually liked Only God Forgives because I think...
Really?
Yeah, there's something about Only God Forgives that I didn't think it was on the level of Drive. Mm-hmm. And I think where things start to differ as far as like what Nicolas Winding Refn is capable of doing as a director versus as a writer is that for Drive, the script was written by a separate screenwriter, an Oscar-nominated screenwriter. I forget his last name, or his first name I forget. His last name is Hosseini. Drive movie. This is the beauty of having Google at your fingertips. Hossein Amini, excuse me, but he wrote that.
Yeah.
And Nicolas Winding Refn wrote Only God Forgives, and then he wrote. He had the story by credit and wrote the screenplay along with a couple other writers for Neon Demon. And I think that Nicolas Winding Refn is a very stylish director, but he can't write.
Yeah, a thought that I actually had this morning while I was rewatching it was that he reminds me in that way of Zack Snyder, actually. Oh, God, I'm just opening myself up to so much abuse online. The last time that I said something about Justice League online, the way that people came for me.
Oh, boy.
Oh, my God. Anyway, so... let's pretend I didn't.
Well, it's okay. They're going to finally get the Zack Snyder cut that they've always wanted, and they'll also realize that Zack Snyder's a false god who doesn't know how to make movies either.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty, bad movie. Like it is. I think there are shots in here that are totally gorgeous. There are shots in here that look like they they'd be better fit in like a music video or something. I think very similar to some of, like, I think Zack Snyder creates really beautiful images as well. I just think that when like, for example, I mean, actually, to bring it full circle, like one of the movies that I saw at the drive-in a few weeks ago was Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. And I love that movie. I think it's actually, I have kind of a hot take that I think it's actually better than the original Dawn of the Dead. I think it's more entertaining. And I think that was one of Zack Snyder's most effective movies because it was written by someone else. I think that similarly, Nicolas Winding Refn, still just speeding through that name.
Old Saint Nick.
When I think when he has help on the writing side, I think he's capable of greatness. I think he knows his way around an image. But yeah, the writing leaves a lot to be desired. There's some real weird turns in this movie, which I assume we'll get to. But yeah, it's structurally it's pretty crazy. It doesn't really adhere to a 3-act structure as I see it.
For sure. That's one of the things that the thing that I'm still sort of struggling with right now as we talk is I still don't know whether or not this was a good or a bad movie. And for me, like it had an impact on me. And the chief thing that I feel is that I was really unsettled by this movie. Yeah. And sometimes, sometimes I watch movies where I get a very easy snap judgment of like, oh yeah, this movie is garbage. And or oh, this movie is really good and interesting. And typically the thing that sets it apart for me is like, this is really good and interesting of a movie is it makes me feel something that is beyond just like, oh, I'm having a good or an interesting time watching this movie. Right. And I can certainly say watching The Neon Demon that I think there's some really interesting choices that are made and some really, you're sort of pushed to this level of discomfort as a viewer, but I still don't know whether that means it's good or not.
Right. I think that in that sense, it's kind of weird because I don't know that I wouldn't necessarily call it like a failure as a movie because I think that Nicholas, I think that he accomplished what he wanted to. I think he set out to make people uncomfortable, but, as I was kind of saying to you, when I saw this at Los Feliz 3 when it came out, there were walkouts and stuff, and I haven't really ever seen that at that theater. I mean, people tend to, not to in my neighborhood. I mean, people tend to be a little more open-minded, especially about movies. That's why we have a couple of great movie theaters here in the neighborhood, and I've seen people are kind of down. People are kind of down for it. Like people are down for whatever. And so to see people walk out of a film like that was kind of a unique experience.
Yeah, you said you came really close to walking out. What was that like? Like what part in the movie almost forced you to that point?
I'll tell you. There was so the first moment that I realized okay, I don't like this. And is it cool if we get into spoilers?
Yeah, spoil away. I read the Wikipedia page for this movie 5 or 6 times before even watching it, just because I didn't know if I was going to feel okay watching this movie. And even after that, knowing what was coming, knowing that Elle Fanning gets eaten and people are dancing around in blood, it still didn't prepare me for the level of just unsettledness I felt watching this movie. So spoil away.
Yeah. So I think the first moment that I kind of realized this didn't make me think about walking out, but I was like, oh, I don't like this, is when Keanu Reeves starts forcibly inserting a knife into Elle Fanning's mouth. He keeps telling her wider. He keeps telling her wider as he's doing it. And I was like, this is not my Keanu Reeves. I don't accept this. This is, did not.
What Bill and Ted, a deleted scene did we step into here? I don't like this. I don't like this. This is bad.
I kind of think of Keanu Reeves as my dad, my movie dad a little bit. And so, seeing him behave that way was just not fun for me.
It's from the second family, though. I hope you can forgive. This is Keanu doesn't want you to see him like this.
Yeah.
He wants to be the proud papa, not the creepy one who's loving having a 13-year-old runaway staying at his motel.
The moment that really made me like think about walking out, though, was Jenna Malone sexually assaulting a dead body.
Oh yeah.
That and likewise, that was the moment when people actually did start walking out of the theater. I mean, I feel like I saw at least like 3 or 4 people quit on it right there.
Yeah, I can see why.
It feels like it kind of comes out of nowhere. I don't, that wasn't really. We did see one scene prior to that where we established that Jenna Malone's character, she's a makeup artist, and we do see one scene before that establishes that she also, her like day job is that she does makeup on like cadavers. Mm-hmm. But it still feels like it really comes out of nowhere. You've kind of at that point been led to think of her as a little bit of a friendly figure in Elle Fanning's life, perhaps like the only person who's genuinely being nice to her.
Right.
And it's not Elle Fanning's body. It's just some other person. And it is the most cuttable scene maybe in movie history. Like it really, you could take that out of the movie. It would not change anything about the characters. It is truly weird. And yeah, that was the one that lost a lot of people and almost me.
I can understand, because that's the thing. It really is that scene. The only thing it does that the scenes around it don't do is disgust you. That's it. Like you as far as character, you learn the turn of Jenna Malone's character being not a good person when she tries to force herself on Elle Fanning. Like
there had to be another way.
Right. You don't need her. You don't need her like having sex with a corpse while there's also like shots of Elle Fanning reclining and touching herself on a chaise longue, and then there's
that's another
moaning
thing
in the background.
Yeah, that's another thing that's kind of unclear about that scene. Is it kind of, and I know that there's a little bit of like an art house film vibe to this thing, so I know some of it is not meant to be taken literally, but like there is a moment there where you're kind of, because of the cross-cutting, you're like, do they have some kind of psychic link? Like, what is happening right now? Because Elle Fanning is kind of touching herself on the chaise lounge as Jenna Malone is doing that, and it's like, okay, they must be sharing some. It feels like an E.T. Elliott type of bond is going on.
We don't want to talk about the fingers in that context. Absolutely, very different. But because it's so out of nowhere, and then you find out right after that. That's when you get to the scenes where Elle Fanning is back at the house, and then she gets pushed into the pool and murdered by Jenna Malone and the 2 models. Mm-hmm. And you see Jenna Malone in the scene after basically a blood orgy. You see her getting with the occult tattoos all over her, and you're not. They kind of did like a Lady Bathory type thing where they sort of bathe in her blood, which kind of happens off screen. I mean, you see them covered in like dried blood, but you don't really see the gory details of it all. It's which is probably a good thing. We don't need to see how they're hooking up pipes to get blood in the shower and in the bathtub. Like that's, we've already belabored the experience enough. That would be like the plumbing version of having sex with a corpse, I think, is seeing all that.
I think structurally, that's another thing that's kind of weird too, is that, it's a little bit like a little bit of a weird No Country for Old Men type curveball where your protagonist is just suddenly dead and the movie's not over yet. Mm-hmm. It is a pretty unexpected thing. I mean, you kind of assume that you're just going to be following Elle Fanning's journey as a model through the whole thing, and then out of nowhere she's murdered very quickly, and it's not quite. It almost like makes more sense in Psycho when she's killed in like the first act, which like that's shocking too. But then at least you're like, okay, that's what. So now the rest of this movie is going to be about solving her murder or something like that. Right. This kind of happens like towards the end of Act 2, and it's like, okay, well, what's left? And it turns out that what's left is someone puking up an eyeball.
It's so, and that's the thing is like, as far as even, you mentioned that there's hard to pin this down into a traditional 3-act structure, which given the placement of that whole sequence, it becomes even harder because there's only about 20 minutes left in the movie after that, which is not really enough time in a 2-hour-long movie to neatly wrap things up. But I don't think that this movie is about doing anything neatly. It's about doing things very slickly. Yeah. But there's not really, I don't know. This isn't a movie that I watched feeling like I totally, not that I didn't understand what was happening, but that I didn't, I don't know. I guess, I didn't like it. Like one of my favorite movies, speaking of movies that are about LA, right? Like this is obviously a very LA centric movie and about the industry sort of in a way. I love Mulholland Drive. Mm-hmm. And Mulholland Drive, I definitely felt like unsettled watching it, but I also wanted to see, as soon as the turn happens before the movie completely shifts, I wanted to watch that movie again immediately. And there's nothing about this movie that I would like to watch again.
I think I think it's a really good comparison because I think, not to put words in his mouth or anything, but I think Refn might have been going for a Lynchian vibe here. I mean, that is kind of how it felt to me. There is a like surreality. I don't know how you say it.
Surreal Winding Refn, I think is how you pronounce it. But they're definitely, especially in some of the sequences in the middle where she's where she's walking on the runway show, but you never. It's weird. The weird Triforce. Yeah,
I think that sequence in particular is. It's funny that you bring that up because I was gonna say I think there's a lot of, as we've kind of said, like style over substance in this movie, and I think that whole sequence all feels like a music video. And instead of having scenes with dialogue where you're seeing her, kind of get a big head or start to believe her own bullshit kind of thing. It all kind of happens during that sequence. After that, we are just to believe that, like, oh, she thinks she's the shit now. Right. And instead of kind of showing us that with character development and scenes of the characters, we are kind of just left to assume that, I guess it just happened during this time where we're watching this triangle on the screen.
I guess.
It's a vexing movie because, as I said, like, I do think it's beautiful. There's just so much left out of the character development that it makes it almost incomprehensible. And then I'm left wondering, like, was that his intention? And does he care about that? And is it supposed to just be more like a nightmare rather than an actual story that we're watching?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's the thing, the thing that I've thought more about watching Nicolas Winding Refn movies is that he really is a director who sort of exists in the mode of, I want to go for style over substance, right? Like, we love Drive, not necessarily because the story is really good, but because it's slick and we want to be Ryan Gosling. Yeah. And we love the way that it's told as opposed to the actual story that's being told. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's the way I feel about Drive. And
no, yeah, totally agreed. I mean, yeah, it is that's why I think that's why the jacket, that's why the car, that's why, like, it's all kind of a substitute for a character. I mean, and that's not to take away from. I think Ryan Gosling is great in that movie, but like he almost does not speak.
Right. And in Only God Forgives, you get sort of the flip side of that, where you have a major character in the movie who is a villain turned up to 11 with Kristen Scott Thomas's character.
Yeah.
And it becomes this, morality play soaked in all of this crazy red neon lighting and Ryan Gosling basically being an impotent character who can't sustain himself or his family. Mm-hmm. But the Neon Demon, I think that style over substance, it's weird for somebody who's a director like Refn, who makes movies that are primarily style over substance, make a movie that seems like it's a critique of style over substance.
Yeah. I don't know if you have seen something that occurred to me today upon rewatching it was, I don't know if you've seen Velvet Buzzsaw.
No, I haven't. The Dan Gilroy, right?
Yeah. Is his follow-up to Nightcrawler, which Nightcrawler is like truly one of my favorite movies.
Love that movie. So great.
So Velvet Buzzsaw, which came out on Netflix, I think is like much less successful, and it strikes me as like very much a similar type of, it's like an attempted critique of an entire industry. The way that Neon Demon kind of tries to satirize the fashion industry, he does with Velvet Buzzsaw with the art industry, and
right.
They're both kind of similarly dipping their toe in horror without being like a full-on horror movie. They're still kind of trying to be like an art house movie. So the stories aren't similar, but what they're going for feels like the same thing. And I feel like in both cases, the satire like doesn't really land. It feels like kind of shallow, mm-hmm. which is, again, like with the fashion industry, like kind of is fitting, but still like, I just don't know if there's anything else to say about the fashion industry that everybody else doesn't already know.
Yeah, I think that
designers are mean. Yeah, I get it. Like,
right, and photographers are creepy.
Yeah,
and models only exist while they're young.
I did like, he's really only in one or two scenes, but the guy, I don't know his name, but played the brother in Face Off, plays like clearly like a Tom Ford type.
Oh yeah,
and I thought he was very good in his scene. But yeah, it feels like a very shallow critique of fashion. Same way I think Velvet Buzzsaw was kind of a shallow critique of the art world.
Yeah, I think that, to bring it back to Mulholland Drive a little bit, where the movie satirizes filmmaking in Mulholland Drive, and I heard it's not even really satire, but just saying. Like the scene where Justin Theroux's character is in the boardroom having the meeting with the financiers for the movie, and they're screaming at him and taking the movie away from him.
Yeah.
It's played for its absurdity. And I think that that's why that works, is because the scene with the brother playing the Tom Ford type, I think also works on some sort of an absurdist level at the very beginning of it, where he's doing that monologue in the voice, and the models are like, "Oh, you're such a natural performer. Did you ever act?" And he just goes on this monologue that every insufferable person you're imagining that they're having in their heads. Mm-hmm. I think that works, but there's other parts of the movie where it's just like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get what you're doing. I felt that way. Did you ever see A Ghost Story?
I still haven't. I have planned on it. Is it streaming anywhere right now?
I don't know, but that's a movie that I almost walked out of. That's the last time I almost walked out of a movie. Because, and I will preface, the only reason I didn't is because I saw it at the ArcLight, and I didn't want to waste my $20 that I had spent to go see it. But
that's one thing I don't miss about the pre-pandemic times is love the ArcLight, hate having to spend like $50 to have a decent time there on a date.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But there's a moment in that movie where right in the middle of the movie, almost, there's a scene where there's a party that happens, and one of the characters at this party, it gets real tied up on him telling this monologue that basically is about like art and creating stuff and how futile of an enterprise it is because nothing really matters. And I was watching that, and I felt during that, I was like, why, if you're just mocking me for watching this movie then? Like, I've already spent probably the first 45 minutes not really digging this.
Yeah.
And now you're like, ha, I tricked you into watching this movie. Aren't you stupid? Which is kind of how I felt. There's parts of that I sort of think come through in Neon Demon.
Yeah, I think that the Jenna Malone corpse rape scene it feels almost like it feels almost like Refn like daring you to walk out of the theater. Like, I mean, like if he'd been sitting in that theater with us and he'd seen people walking out, I think he would have been. I think part of him would have been like perversely pleased by that. I think that's. It does feel like a dare. It's like, what are you trying to get me to watch, man? Like,
right.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing, I know that people walked out at Cannes when it screened there, but it's the kind of thing, I imagine he probably watched people walk out during that scene while he was watching it, or boo the movie, and him just sitting there being like, yes, they're played right into my hands.
One thing that I love about Cannes is that they do openly boo. That's something that we've kind of lost from the movie theater going experience. I hope we can bring that back when the quarantine is over.
Yeah, well, movie theaters are going to be such a different experience altogether now. I think now's the time. Let's bring back booing.
Yeah.
And I think let's normalize booing movies that we don't like after we see them.
Or during, you know?
Yeah. Well, I hope that once quarantine lifts, we can go see a movie together and hopefully not boo it. But if the situation arises, we'll boo something at the Vista together.
Yeah, man, for sure. Man, I miss the Vista. That's been one of the things that walking by that and seeing their little like sign outside, it's like to be continued or whatever, is like, it's such a bummer.
But it'll be back. I believe in the Vista. Well, if there's a movie that you think people should watch that, let's say, sort of has some of the maybe same themes that get brought up in Neon Demon, but instead of Neon Demon, what do you think people should watch instead?
Well, I don't know if it has the same themes, but I think a movie. I think the thing that Neon Demon has going for it is that it's really beautiful and looking, and that's something that you don't see super often in horror. And so I would say that a couple of examples of movies that I think are very visually striking that are actually good and or scary would be Midsummer would be one. Mm-hmm. I think very visually striking. I think It Follows, I think, kind of falls into that. And most recently, I watched on Shudder a few days ago, The Color Out of Space with Nicolas Cage, and it's an adaptation of a Lovecraft story. It came out like really soon after Mandy, and it's funny because the posters kind of look the same. They're both like very like pink. Mm-hmm. But Color Out of Space literally makes use of a color in the movie's plot, and it is gorgeous. And I think that's another really good one.
I got to check out Color Out of Space. I love the trailer for it, and I was a big fan of Mandy, and I think that the other movie that I want to see that I'm guessing based on the trailer uses elements that are in those movies also is She Dies Tomorrow.
Oh, I still haven't watched that one yet. Yeah.
I've heard it's really, really good and interesting. And my guess is it probably has a lot of those crazy shots and the usage of color and lighting and stuff that you see in the Neon Demon, but without anybody raping a corpse. So good news.
Yeah, it's just such a, I don't know. Again, it's not that I wouldn't recommend someone check out the Neon Demon. I think you could enjoy it for its visuals and stuff like that. I just think that as a story, like the wheels just fall off halfway through, and then the wheels just keep rolling away from the car. Like, yeah.
And then they come to rest on Elle Fanning's eyeball, staring back up at you.
Yeah.
Well, Chase, it's been a pleasure talking about processing up our feelings on this movie together.
Thanks, man.
Of course, happy to have you. Where can the listeners find you and see what you're up to if they want to get?
They can follow me anywhere at Chase Mitz, ChaseMIT. It's the same thing on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd, so it's always the same name.
Great. And you can follow me at Diet J on all the social platforms. And if you like the show, subscribe on Patreon. You can get into the Blockbusting Film Club and get bonus episodes there. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks again, Chase.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
This has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.